Joe Biden begins process of full troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. So guys, another story here that I know I'm very late on. Brother's got to work, brother's got to pay the bills, so I only get so much time to do these videos. But by now, I'm sure you guys have heard that Joe Biden has said that we will have a full troop withdrawal from Afghanistan by September 11th of this year. Of course, the full withdrawal date is very symbolic, a perfect little piece of propaganda. Almost 21 years since we entered Afghanistan. I honestly can't even fathom the amounts. There's conflicting stats on how many people were killed in that war. Just the amount of American lives lost, several thousand, is a tragedy. But, some figures I have read since the United States involvement in the Middle East since the early 2000s, over 1 million people have died, many civilians. This war has been just an absolute waste, a tragedy, a human tragedy on the scale, in my view, just as bad as World War I or World War II. Obviously not in terms of volume, but when it comes to human misery, there's something there that can't be quantified. And now I would like to commend Joe Biden for finally, after 2 decades, 20 years overdue, for finally pulling U.S. troops out of Afghanistan. But I would like to commend him, but unfortunately the truth of the matter is, in a sense, this amounts to nothing. We're still going to be having military bases in that region ready to strike at any moment. I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption, and maybe you guys can drop a comment with some resources letting me know if I'm on the money with this or not, but I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that we will continue contracting private security forces, i.e. mercenaries, to continue out whatever sort of political military actions we need in that region. It's great that American GIs are no longer going to be on the ground there. We'll see if he keeps his word. But still, our involvement in the regions of Iraq and Afghanistan will be ongoing. As it is said, the war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be continuous. And military action in the Middle East has been incredibly profitable for the military-industrial complex corporations like Boeing and Raytheon. I believe there was actually a quote from a Raytheon executive who's now serving in Joe Biden's cabinet that essentially amounts to a omission that we will not be, for all intents and purposes, be actually pulling out of Afghanistan. But there's more to this as well that I would like to touch on that isn't just about Afghanistan. It is my view that the pulling out of Afghanistan is just one move in a bigger plan. And the reason why I say that is we are seeing an increase in anti-Chinese rhetoric. I made a video recently about China clapping back about the human rights abuse allegations, the tense standoff that happened at the Alaskan summit between China and the U.S. Defense Department. And in the words from the Secretary of Defense, he said something along the lines of, Afghanistan is no longer a good use of our military and intelligence resources. We have other threats that we need to be focusing on, i.e. China. Coupled with that, we are seeing troop movements on the part of Putin, on the part of Russia in the Ukraine. Tensions there between the U.S., NATO, and Russia have been, just steadily, rising, becoming more and more tense. It is my view and the view of many other leftists that I've spoken with on various social media platforms that these troops probably might, won't even be going home. They'll probably be redirected in one sense or another to the Ukraine, to NATO bases. We've had a multi-star American general responsible for the Pacific theater talk about needing more resources, needing more armaments in the Pacific. This is, of course, in relation to rising tensions with China. So what does this all mean? Looking at all this, looking at, for example, this article here that says France is doing, large troop movements, large military exercises to mirror what is essentially, it sounds like in the article, a world war scenario. And obviously troop movements Military exercises are nothing new. Our nation does it all the time. NATO does it all the time. But the scale of this one is apparently very large. So I take all these pieces, the pulling out of Afghanistan. I think Biden may have gone back on his promise not to sell arms to Saudi Arabia, but the decision, albeit maybe temporary or false or a PR decision, to stop selling arms to Saudi Arabia, anti-Chinese rhetoric, the general asking for more resources for the Pacific theater, tensions between Russia and the NATO and U.S. alliance. All these things lead me to believe that, of course, and this is nothing new, that this is by no means the end of Western or American imperialism in the world. It is my view that it is a temporary reel back in order to move forward to a bigger surge in other theaters. I have no real way, obviously I am not part of the intelligence community, or am I, of knowing what is going to happen, what the bigwigs, what the brass hats are planning. But after, 2020, the economic depression that the world is in, COVID-19 ravaging the world, the world economy essentially in shambles. Those are usually precursors to large economic standoffs, and then in turn large military conflicts. All these things coming together, I have some fears, I have some trepidations that the people who rule our country are preparing for the big one. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. We live in a globalized world where interdependence among countries, amongst economies is essential. But all of these things, coupled with the obvious rise of China, the obvious decline of the American empire, leads me to believe that we are heading headlong into a moment of shifting paradigm. I've talked about the shifting paradigm before on this channel, and how a lot of times these shiftings of paradigms end up creating a lot of chaos. World wars, World War I, World War II was essentially a transitioning of power amongst the capitalist nations of the world. That's what caused it. You could say the similar thing about the French Revolution. That was a shifting paradigm. It didn't end well for a lot of people. And all of these things that are happening and trends that have been going on for well over a decade, if not 2 decades, leads me to believe that we are heading straight for that powder keg moment, which leads to a shifting paradigm in the world, which changes the structure of power, military, and economic in the world irreparably. I don't know, guys. You'll have to let me know what you think about this. If you have any resources you want to share with me, drop them in the comments so I can read up a little bit. I've kind of told you what my perspective is, what this pulling out of Afghanistan means in relation to all these other little pieces. Drop a comment, let me know what you guys think. But unfortunately, that's all I have for you guys. I just kind of wanted to share my thoughts with you about what I thought was going on with this, why they're pulling out of Afghanistan, and what may be lying in wait in the future. But of course, I'm thinking out loud. As always, guys, it's great hanging out with you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Bye.